Communications Corner. I'm your host for this evening, Gail Lewis. Tonight joining me is a friend, a colleague, and we are Anthony Andrews, and we're going to chat about community choices. Here on Communication Corner, we always spotlight or highlight some aspect of communication. And tonight we're going to look at one of the ways in which communities make choices. We communicate as a community, say that 3 times fast, via our choices. And we all in the greater community have lots of choices coming up this fall, the general election in November 2013. So joining me tonight, as I said, is my guest for the evening here on Communication Corner, Anthony Andrews. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, Gail. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for joining us here tonight on Communication Corner.
Well, thank you for having me.
Very nice to have you. Let's clear it up first. Democratic District Leader. I see this long chyron underneath your name.
Yes.
Democratic District Leader, 32nd AD Part B.
Yes, that's correct.
Explain to our viewers exactly what that means, where that is.
Well, the Democratic District Leader is a person who helps to select the candidates for public office, from the president on down to the city council. And we're important because we help to get out the votes from the Democrats in the community, and then we help to bring back the services to the community that the constituents are looking for. And in my case, the Democratic constituents. So the 32nd AD is actually the 32nd Assembly District.
Okay.
It's the district that is represented by Assemblywoman Vivian Cook.
And where is that geographically for our friends who may not be familiar with Queens?
It's Rochdale Village, Jamaica, South Ozone Park, Richmond Hill.
And so Part B, what part is that?
Part B is basically a small part of Richmond Hill, a small part of South Ozone Park, all of Rochdale Village, and some of Jamaica and South Jamaica, of course.
Okay. And it also says on that very long chyron that you are a professor at York College. What do you teach?
Yes, I teach political science, actually.
Okay. How's that going?
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's great to work at York College. I'm an administrator there also, and I teach American government, and I teach political involvement, state and local government.
What's that?
Well, it's how do you get involved to make the system work for you, and how do you get involved in such a way that you can find out how to work within the system so that you can improve your community.
Great, that's what we're talking about today, community.
That's
so that's perfect. So we're talking about a lot of the choices that we're making as a community come fall. We've got the Democratic primaries coming up on September 10th.
Right.
And then we have the general election, of course, coming up on November 5th. So we've got plenty of choices to make as a community. There's quite a few things going on in Southeast Queens. That's the geographic area that we're talking about today.
Sure.
So I'd like to highlight some of those things and help our community make some choices.
Okay.
So going into the election, we've got lots of different challenges in Southeast Queens going on right now.
Sure.
One of them, of course, is our infrastructure.
Yes.
And overcrowding, overuse of the land, overuse of our utilities, of the water system, et cetera, et cetera.
That's correct.
So, so what are some of those problems? And then, of course, I'm going to follow up with what are some of those solutions.
Okay, sure. So, you know, we have had a change in our community over the years. A lot of 1- and 2-family homes, which our districts are zoned for. Community Board 12, Community Board 10, Community Boards 9, 13. These are 1- and 2-family residential home communities for the most part. Over the years, some of the zoning requirements have been changed to allow 3-family homes, to allow legal 2-family homes to be subdivided illegally, unfortunately. Is something that has happened all too frequently in Southeast Queens. Some of the families that lived in these homes have moved out and moved elsewhere. We have a lot of new families that have moved into our communities, a lot of new immigrants that moved into these communities. Some of them brought family from back home, and they found it useful to sometimes subdivide the family home into, instead of a 1-family home, into a home where 3 or 4 families can be housed.
Right.
Sometimes the basement, sometimes the attic is in use. Sometimes they've built walls, taken down walls so that they can create 2 apartments on a 2nd floor where there was only 1 bedroom before, not just put in a bathroom, maybe even put in a kitchen.
Well, it's not even just immigrants. Right now, times are tough. If you own a home or if you're still paying a mortgage on a home, it seems fiscally sound to rent a basement, to have that extra income coming in every month just to cover the bills.
Well, that and the fact that, you know, there was a study done just last week, a national study done regarding young women and men who are coming home to live with their parents.
Right.
So some of them have found it useful to move back home with mom and dad because times are very difficult. And mom and dad, instead of just converting their room into, or reconverting their room back into their bedroom if they've used it for a den or something, mom and dad have said, well, why don't we just finish the basement and maybe allow you to use that as your apartment from now on, or finish the attic and allow you to use that for your apartment. Or what if we knocked down this wall and you maybe had this room and this room as a bedroom and a living room. We don't need 2 bedrooms up here anymore. We have 1 master bedroom for mom and or dad, and you can have these other 2 rooms and this can be your apartment.
Right.
So you're right. So a lot of these families have converted their homes into multiple dwelling residences, and that's a huge burden on the infrastructure.
And when you're saying infrastructure, what exactly do you mean?
All the electricity, the water, the sewage, the sanitation, even down to, the amount of cars that are parked in your block. I mean, it's not necessarily infrastructure, but it's a burden, when you've got all of these cars and there's no place to park, people are not using their driveways, or if they use their driveways, they've got 3 cars in the driveway, and they've got 2 or 3 cars because you've got 5 families living in a residential home. And so all of that, when these people are coming home, they're parking these cars, but on the weekends, money is tight, so people are actually washing their cars. So you're not just using the water to boil water, or to, if you buy bottled water at home, or to drink the water, or to wash, yourself. A lot of these people are home, they're washing their cars on Sunday.
There's many more flushes if there's 5 families living in a home.
A lot more flushes also, certainly.
Plenty of flushing going on.
That's correct.
So we've got the water, we've got electricity. You're using more electricity.
Sure, sure.
What about sanitation?
Sanitation, real big problem. We've got now, instead of 1 family putting out garbage, we've got 3, 4 families putting out garbage. Well, when you have so much garbage, I mean, that attracts more rodents.
Absolutely.
So sanitation has found the illegal conversion of a lot of these homes actually be a burden for them also. And instead of, the time it takes to get 1 block done, with the normal time, you're looking at maybe 20 houses on a block and 1 family putting out garbage. Now you've got 4 families putting out garbage as 1 house. It's taking much more time to collect the garbage, and it's much more garbage to collect at that. So, and that's a burden on the infrastructure. So do you hire more sanitation men? Well, they're cutting departments. All over the city, they're cutting employees. They're not hiring as much. That's a burden on infrastructure.
Absolutely. What about electricity and gas usage, of course? The
same thing, electricity and gas, a real big problem. So the electrical grid, we have so many, like the blackouts we've had over the last several months, right? The electrical grid was built to handle a certain amount of households with electricity. But now in these homes, you have many more people in these homes that are using electricity. So the grids that were set up to handle a certain amount of people, assuming that these are the number of households within the grid, and the electrical grid could handle this many households within this grid. Now you've got much more electricity being used.
Right.
Hence, more blackouts, because the electrical grid can't take the continuous usage of these families that are using and these families that live in these homes that are using much more electricity than a 1-family home
and
would
much
use.
more electricity than it was originally intended for.
Yes,
that's really the
exactly right.
crux.
Exactly right.
So what can we do? We've got the stress, we've got this infrastructure that's already in place, and we've got the stress on the infrastructure, and that's electrical stress, gas stress, I think of the duty man. It's a horrible word to say, but sewage stress.
Sewage stress.
The stress on the water table. We're using more water, as you said, washing cars, and also flushing, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
So do we rebuild the infrastructure? How do we work? What do we do as a solution here?
Well, we've talked about some of these things in the past. Sure, you can build or rebuild the infrastructure, or you can build an infrastructure that will accommodate many more families in these communities.
And also in Southeast Queens, in particular, we've got the flooding issue as well.
Yes, yes. And of course, that ties into everything also. So, I mean, the drainage can't handle and it can't accommodate the number of families that are using the drainage system, as we talked about, like you said, lots more flushing and lots more water usage and so on and so forth. The system that we built was not built to accommodate all of these people.
So what do we do?
So we've got to do one of 2 things. We rebuild the infrastructure, which takes time, of course, street reconstruction, sewage and drainage reconstruction, pipes that have to be placed in the ground, underground, to be able to deal with this sewage, to be able to take the sewage out from maybe Southeast Queens out to Idlewild or out to Jamaica Bay. I mean, so you rebuild the infrastructure, and you do this over a period of time, but you've got to have people that are willing to commit the time and the money to do this. Some of these projects take 5 to 10 years.
Right.
They're not only
and they cost.
And they cost a lot of money. They're not only in the 4-year plan, but they're in the 10-year plan. And you've got to have people that are willing to focus on the solutions as opposed to a patchwork solution. A patchwork solution where you throw a couple $1 million at it, you do a couple pipes, you do a street, and okay, don't worry, this is going to be okay. We'll deal with the flooding. We put a couple more sewer, a couple more basins in, and that'll take more water when the water comes in. Well, what do you do now? Because that flows out to Jamaica Bay or to Idlewild. Or so what do you do? Can you still accommodate? Because it's not just this block. Can you accommodate the next block and the next block over?
Right.
So you've got to put a plan in place, and you've got to have people working together to put a plan in place that will allow us to do this. A long-term plan. So you start at the city level. You start with the city council people, because these are the people with the money to put the time and the effort and energy into coming up with a plan, a solution, not only for my area, but maybe the area next door.
Right.
So if I represent the 27th Councilmanic District, like Leroy Comrie currently does.
Right.
I'm working with Councilmember Reuben Wills in the 28th Councilmanic District, right? And we're working on not just stopping at this block where our border is, but we're working on putting some money in
into 28 and into the 31st district, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly right, and bordering with Donovan Richards over here on the 31st. We've got to continue to have elected officials that are willing to work together on a solution for everyone, not just for their own district.
And also in the long term.
And in the long term. And of course, there's solutions also at the borough level, because the borough president, Helen Marshall, is leaving right now. I happen to be supporting a candidate, Melinda Katz. Melinda Katz, hopefully, who has been in the borough president's office, somebody who knows what it takes to get these things done, and somebody who is working very hard to get back into this position of borough presidency, and not just in the borough president's office, but getting into the borough presidency, will hopefully be able to help us with some of these problems, because there's a lot of capital money that can be allocated at the borough level. And then, of course, the mayoralty.
Right.
You've got to get the mayor involved.
Absolutely.
You've got to get some money from the mayor.
Is there a mayoral candidate? And I know you can't speak for them all, but in your as a district leader, you do have some area of expertise, obviously, in political science and also in the local races. Is there a mayoral candidate who has, that you know of, who has committed to this?
Bill de Blasio, of course, and that's who my union supports, Bill de Blasio, the Professional Staff Congress.
I'm a member as well,
yes,
PSC.
Yes, PSC.
Yeah.
We've endorsed Bill de Blasio, and so the PSC has endorsed Bill de Blasio because we feel he's a city council member who has worked very hard to bring dollars into his community, and he can help do that throughout the entire city. So I think any one of these candidates would be capable of doing it. You've got to be able to work hand in hand with the local officials and the borough president, who has a lot of capital dollars to put into these projects also.
Right. Do you think Melinda Katz would, and again, I know you're, you have some expertise in this, do you think that she would be someone who would get on this kind of stress on the infrastructure problem and offer a viable solution long term?
I think she has already. She's talked about this in some of the debates she's had. I mean, Melinda is experienced because she's been in the borough president's office before, as I've said. She's worked in the borough president's office, worked very closely with the borough president, and I think Melinda has made a commitment to Southeast Queens. I mean, she's the only candidate who is running for borough president right now, currently, who has visited Southeast Queens.
Really?
So, I mean, I'd like to think that,
It's for the people who are watching, who may not be familiar, it's a rather large span. It's a huge geographic area.
It is,
so
yes.
To hear that someone has not visited, that's kind of disconcerting, to say the least.
I would, listen, if you count debates, but I'm not counting debates. I mean, come into our communities.
Visits.
Right, come into our community, find out what we're
Churches,
experiencing.
etc.
Yes, find out
PTA meetings.
Yes, find out what we need. Find out what we'd like. What we need the next borough president to do is to be there with us now. Don't tell us you're going to be there with us after you get elected, because if you can't be with us now, then I certainly don't think you're going to be there after you get elected.
Yeah, now would be the time.
Exactly right. And Melinda's done that.
And on a more local level, since we're talking about infrastructure, there's lots of people running right now in the 27th.
Yes.
If you could enlighten us as to who they are.
Oh, yes. Well,
first, where is the 27th geographically?
Cambria Heights, Hollis, St. Albans, Queens Village, part of Jamaica. That's Hollis, I think I said.
Yeah.
So that's the 27th Councilmanic District. And it was a district that was represented for many years by Councilman Archie Spigner,
Right.
who's got his name on a post office.
I know. I believe he's the only living person to have their name on a post office,
That is
which
correct.
is huge.
That is correct.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you name a post office after somebody, right?
Exactly,
And-
not posthumously.
Right, while they're living. I mean, just incredible. But he's been an incredible leader for a number of years. I worked for Archie Spigner for 2.5 years. I started as a college student, worked as a legislative aide for him in the community, representing a number of school boards, precinct councils, community boards. And I learned a lot working with the former deputy majority leader. He represented the area for a number of years and then was term limited.
Right.
And he started as a bus driver.
Yes.
And worked for transit and worked his way through school, a very intelligent man, and became a long-time city council member, one of the most powerful men in the city. Became the first...
Still is.
Became one of the first black elected officials in the city and is known as the dean of the elected officials in Queens, not just because of his age, because of his longevity in this game.
Absolutely. And his good looks. We gotta throw that in there, too.
And then he passed the torch on to Leroy Comrie,
Right.
who was the current city council person. And as Leroy actually left the city council or began to contemplate leaving, he began to think about his legacy. And part of his legacy was hoping to get someone in the position to anoint somebody or to select somebody he thought he could support to be the next city council person, somebody who he thought would be a good person.
And Councilman Comrie, just FYI, he's leaving because he's term limited.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, he would have stayed, I'm sure, but he was term limited also. So Councilmember Comrie is unfortunately leaving the city council. He's done a lot of good work, a longtime friend of mine. We worked in Archie Spigner's office together.
Wow.
Leroy Comrie, Malcolm Smith, and myself were in the same office at the same time,
Wow.
working, doing different things for the council person. Leroy has done an excellent job, and upon leaving, he decided to select someone he thought would be a good candidate for city council. That person happened to be Danique Miller.
Okay.
Danique Miller is the candidate that he thought, who is actually, interesting enough, a former transit worker, just like Councilman Archie Spigner.
That's funny.
The president of the Amalgamated Transit Union.
That's the AMU? Right?
ATU.
ATU,
Yes.
sorry.
The Amalgamated Transit Union, a strong union leader who was actually negotiated, I think, the last city contract for a union. The last contract that the union would give from the city was negotiated by Danique Miller. He really pushed hard to get a contract for his workers. And he's done a lot of good stuff, supporting a lot of elected officials over the years.
Well, you know, here at Communication Corner, we ask the hard-hitting questions.
Okay.
What does the I stand for?
Now, that's a good question. I'm not sure I want to talk about the I.
Okay, but it's
It's Danique Miller.
Danique Miller,
yes,
his name,
first,
okay.
Yes, Danique doesn't talk about his
first name.
He doesn't talk about his first name at all.
We'll figure that out and we'll get back. We'll get back to the viewers. Who are the other candidates in the stable this year?
Well,
We've got Danique Miller, who will
Yes.
figure out what the I stands for and
that's
get back to
that's
everybody.
correct. That's correct. That's correct.
And who else?
And you have Clyde Vannell, I
Right.
believe.
Local attorney.
Local attorney.
And a guest here on Communication Corner.
Okay, guest here also. Very intelligent guy, seems to be. Then you have Sandra Peden,
Right.
who is a very experienced young woman and who has supported a number of candidates for city council over the years. Worked as the chief of staff for Councilwoman Juanita Watkins at one time.
Really?
Yes. Also worked for Councilmember Tom White, and I believe has worked for Councilmember Reuben Wells also.
Okay, and you used to work for Councilman Tom White as well.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, so she's someone who has that experience as well with
Yes.
city government.
Yes, she does have experience in city government. She's been around for a long time. You have Joan Flowers, who is
Right.
an attorney also, and her family owns a sports and rehabilitation clinic in Southeast Queens, and she's been an attorney and supported a number of us for a number of years also.
Yes.
Sandra and Joan are both friends of mine, actually.
Okay.
And so it's very difficult because you have friends running in the same race also.
Right.
And then you have Manny Kaufman.
Right.
Manny Kaufman is being supported by the former council person, Archie Spigner.
Okay.
And
That's huge.
That is huge. And Manny is a candidate who has also been very active in the community, Brinkhoff Civic Association for a number of years. Community activist.
I know he was also involved in the water table issue, the flooding in Southeast Queens, when he worked for Assemblyman Scarborough.
Yes, yes. Manny's worked on the state level with Assemblyman Scarborough. And he's definitely been very involved with that issue from an environmental standpoint.
Right.
He's very strong in that area.
And so what, you were talking about Danique Miller, do you know what he would do for the environment?
Well, you know, Danique has talked about this extensively. Danique is for rebuilding the infrastructure. He's for getting money, bringing capital dollars down to Southeast Queens to help resolve some of the flooding issues in
So
his
that's
district.
that's the flooding issues, that's the infrastructure issues, that's that long-term planning that we were talking about?
Yes, yes, yes.
What about zoning?
Well,
Right now, we've got 1- and 2-family homes that are being turned over to 4 or 5 multifamily dwellings. What about that?
well, you've got to be someone who is willing to step out on this issue so that you can have the proper authorities enforce the zoning restrictions, right? So the buildings department needs to come out and they need to cite people who are creating these violations. It's very difficult because sometimes elected officials don't want to get out on this issue because they're afraid that they'll lose votes.
And it's very difficult. You don't want to interfere in people's dollars and cents.
That's correct.
You know, if that's a source of income, you don't want to interfere with that.
That's correct, you know.
If it's family, you don't want to interfere with that.
Sure, sure. So people are very, very hesitant to come out on this issue. And how do you find out? You know, do you have the buildings department go around like the Secret Service and they're knocking on everybody's door? Come out and tell me you got 5 families in there. You know, what are you doing in there? Come on out. I know you got about 10 people living in there.
Yeah.
It's not easy to do, right? So, and how do you do that as an elected official? You want to go out and have that happen and have you look like the guy who's running the Gestapo out there to your communities, right? So to speak. No, you don't want to do that. It's very difficult. But what you got to do is you got to get people to understand that when they sell their homes or when these developers build their homes, that they're building the correct way.
Within code.
Exactly right. They're building willfully within the 1- and 2-family coding.
Right.
And you also want to make sure that the people that are buying these homes, that they understand that these homes are 1- and 2-family dwellings.
Right.
They're not to be subdivided into 4- and 5-family dwellings. And you have to be, you know, very stern. You have to make it very clear to the developers and the people that are buying these homes that, you know, if you're an elected official in these areas, that you don't want to see your infrastructure overburdened, that you want to see us continue to have a good infrastructure, and you're rebuilding the infrastructure because the infrastructure is old anyway.
So since we're on the topic of Mr. Miller, what's his solution to this problem?
Well, Danique Miller is...
Is he going to knock on doors?
No, he's not. And Danique Miller says, hey, listen, we've got 5... You know, we've got 5 people living in the house right now. We've got 1 or 2 families, and you know, you have some families maybe coming over from where you lived before, or maybe you just have to rebuild the inside of your home because you need extra income, as you say, or maybe you're bringing home 1 or 2 kids who couldn't make it after college because it's been very difficult for them to find jobs. So Danique Miller has said, well, let's build affordable housing.
Okay.
Let's create affordable housing for those people who may not have the money to buy a house.
When it comes to affordable housing, first thing people say is not in my backyard. Where?
Well, that's interesting, because when we talk about affordable housing, you don't have to talk about apartment buildings that you're building which are not up to code, which are not going to be taken care of, which are going to be condemned or should be condemned at some point in time.
Falling down.
Right, right. You're talking about building apartment dwellings that are going to be maintained, that the New York City Housing Authority is going to maintain and keep up to code. You're talking about building 1-family and 2-family homes in the community that are going to be affordable for people.
What about blocks of apartments in an apartment building that are set aside for affordable housing?
Well, that's fine too. You can do that also. But why not build homes also?
Yeah.
Let's build some homes. We have so many vacant homes. And you know, Southeast Queens got hit by the foreclosure crisis harder than any place in America. And everybody knows it. It's a statistical fact. A statistical fact that we were hit harder by the foreclosure scam crisis than anybody. So we have a lot of vacant homes. We have a lot of banks that are foreclosing these homes, and the homes are just sitting there. So why couldn't these homes be fixed up? Why couldn't the banks come together with the elected officials to make sure that there's funding to build affordable homes in these communities, so that those people who move into these communities now are not thinking about buying a home that is dilapidated or falling down and fixing up, but they're building homes that people can afford that will be up to code, and new homes.
Right.
Homes that are going to...
It can be proud of. In areas they can be proud of.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Why aren't we doing that? We're always thinking about apartment buildings and dwellings and building up, but we should be spreading out. There's enough vacant land, and there's enough in terms of the homes that are vacant right now that we can rebuild structures that exist and we can take some of this vacant land and build on this vacant land so we can make affordable housing. And Danique Miller is all about making affordable homes, making homes that are affordable for people in our community to buy, so that they're not forced to be in these homes or buying apartments or buying 2 rooms or 3 rooms to have their family in. There are more people buying homes, or I should say renting rooms in these homes that are being bought now than anything.
Instead of putting their money together and buying.
Exactly.
All right, Anthony, if people want more information about you, how can they find you?
Oh, well, if they need to reach me, they can reach me on my my email at admaandrews.jr.
At Gmail?
At gmail.com. That's, I'm sorry, that's ADMA Junior, JUNIOR at gmail.com.
Great. And for more information about the candidates, specifically the ones, Melinda Katz and Danique Miller?
They can reach out to Danique Miller. He's got a website also. And
that's voteidaniquemiller.com. And Melinda Katz?
melindakatz.com.
Okay, great. And most importantly, get out and vote.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And November 5th is the general election. So whomever you're voting for, make sure you exercise your right and get out and do it on November 5th. Thanks for joining me on Communication Corner. With me this evening, my guest, Anthony Andrews, Democratic District Leader, 32nd AD, Part B. This has been Communication Corner. I'm your host, Gail Lewis. Email me, newday2010@yahoo.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again real soon. Good night.
Thank you again.
Social network can start off as a joke, not realizing that you can hurt someone else. Just a click away, can't be erased, you can't work forever, that's what they all say.
We don't have a lot of communication, but yet we have a lot of discrimination. It doesn't matter where you are or where you're from, what it really matters is that it needs to stop. Septiembre 17, 1993, me salieron modales del mar y me quedé todo. Me acuerdo cuando mi abuela me decía que mi papá me negó cuando yo estaba en la barriga. Me siento lleno de vida y me quito con la sociedad. Un futuro de mañana, una vida quiero cambiar.
No one stands alone. You must be bigger than the bully.
Bring yourself up, conquer your fears. You can't remain voiceless. Bring yourself up, conquer your fears. You can't remain voiceless.
Bigger than the bully, bigger than the bully. Bigger than the bully, bigger than the bully. Bigger than the bully, bigger than the bully. Bigger than the bully, bigger than the bully.
Help others find their inner strength. Be bigger than the bully.